that those who start to work, we can, yeah, so then we can kind of write it in exactly. So we've done all that. I really check it once or twice to make sure that all the fact checking is going on. And so we
कुछ और कविताएं करिए ना।
हाँ, मैं ट्रांसलेशन का काम कर रही थी।
हम एक पुस्तक निकालते हैं हिंदी में मियाँ पोएट्री।
जी बिल्कुल, मुझे लगता है निकालना ही चाहिए।
लगता तो है, लेकिन आप जब करेंगी तब ना।
लगता है क्या होगा? अगर अगले 10 दिन में हो जाए तो हम पब्लिश कर देंगे। मैं कह रहा हूँ अगर अगले 10 दिन में हो जाए, 10-15 दिन में,
थोड़ा समय का भी महत्व होता है ना।
कि अगर अभी होगा, अभी वो पब्लिश होगा, तो हम हिंदी अंग्रेजी दोनों में करना चाहते हैं। तो यानी आपकी स्क्रिप्ट जो है उसमें हिंदी अंग्रेजी
घेरे होते हैं
सर। आलसी में भी लेकिन बहुत लिख दिए इन लोगों ने, और इतना लिख दिया कि परेशानी हमें हो गई है।
एक जुमला फिराक साहब बहुत कहा करते थे, क्लासरूम में भी मैं सुनता था। कहते थे तहजीब आलसी लोग।
नहीं सो तो फिराक खुद ही थे,
तो
खड़े हो गए और
बहुत कुछ कहा जा सकता है। और अच्छा ही है कि आलस्य के कारण ही शायद इतनी अच्छी कविता लिखते हैं ये लोग। पर हम लोग इस मामले में आलस्य नहीं करना चाहते हैं।
अनुवाद में आलस्य नहीं होती, अनुवाद
में आलस्य चलेगा।
आपको वो प्रिविलेज नहीं है।
ये तो और आप लोग क्या चाहते हैं, यहाँ क्या करना चाहिए या असम के बाहर क्या करना चाहिए?
एक तो है सर, जो पोइट्री है, पोइट्री के साथ हम लोग पूरा स्टोरी जुड़ा हुआ है। तो पोइट्री के साथ साथ जिसके लिए
एक कोई कहानी लिख दे, वो उसका भी अनुवाद हो जाए। मतलब जो पोइट्री के साथ कहानी है, मतलब कहानी मतलब जो भी प्रसंग है, कैसे वो लिखे, आप ही लिख दीजिए।
टेस्टिमोनीज का भी आप सिलेक्शन कर सकते हैं, जोड़ सकते हैं अपना।
नहीं, जब आप कह रहे हैं कहानी तो उसका मतलब कैसे?
मैं कहता हूँ मतलब ये है सर, जो पोइट्री है उसका जो कॉन्टेक्स्ट है, हम किस कॉन्टेक्स्ट में लिख रहे हैं।
ये बहुत इम्पोर्टेंट मुझे इसीलिए लगता है क्योंकि जो मैंने तो वो दूसरे साइड से भी देखा, क्यों ये जो एक्सट्रीम रिएक्शन क्यों आया था। तो एक्सट्रीम रिएक्शन जहाँ से आया था, कोई भी एक लोग इसका लिटरेरी क्वालिटी पे सवाल नहीं उठा रहे। इनफैक्ट जो लिटरेरी लोग हैं उनको लगता है कि इस हम डायलेक्ट हैं या लैंग्वेज का जो है, इसमें जो वर्ड्स का जो हिटिंग है वो खास असमिया या बंगाली में अभी नहीं आएगा, क्योंकि अभी का जो असमिया या बंगाली होगा वो बहुत हिसाब किताब हो गया, बहुत यूज्ड हो गया। पर इस डायलेक्ट में कभी, और हर शब्द जो है ना, जो पहली बार मैंने जो सुना था उनका जो एक उनका मैं नेली का सुना था और दूसरा मैं सुना था ये अंगोमा, सुनते ही आपका खड़ा हो जाता है क्योंकि आपको लगता है कि ये एक्चुअली ये हो रहा है आपके सामने। और ये जो उसका जो है ना, उसका बहुत
मुझे भी लगता है कि कविता सब इतना जीवंत है ना, जब मैं पढ़ती हूँ तो मुझे लगता है कि मैं दिल्ली में होके मैं अपना गांव देख रही हूँ, वहाँ के लोग कैसे जी रहे हैं, उनकी ज़िंदगी कैसे गुजर रहा है। एक कविता है, मैं पिछले कुछ टाइम से कोशिश कर रही हूँ ट्रांसलेट करने की, लेकिन मैं करके भी मुझे अफसोस हो रहा है कि नहीं, मैं वो चीज़ नहीं ला पा रही हूँ। वही बात, क्योंकि वो जो मिठास है, वो जो देसीपन है, वो जो एक ऐसा लगता है कि वो पोल्यूशन फ्री चीज़ है, वो नहीं आ पा रहा है। तो वो बहुत परेशान कर देता है।
अनुवाद के बारे में दो सिद्धांत प्रचलित हैं। एक तो है कि पोइट्री इज लॉस्ट इन ट्रांसलेशन, तो हर एक ही कविता, हर अनुवाद जो है वो एक तरह से कुछ न कुछ कविता गंवा देता है। लेकिन दूसरी तरफ ऑक्टेवियो पाज ने ये कहा था कि पोइट्री सर्वाइव्स ट्रांसलेशन, कि कविता अनुवाद के बावजूद जिंदा रह जाती है।
So that is what your task is.
तो इसलिए इससे हताश मत होइए कि आपको।
मुझे वो कविता बहुत पसंद है और मैं जोर जबरदस्ती सबको उसी लैंग्वेज में सुना देती हूँ कि सुन लो एक बार। बाहर उन्नीस बाहर में सब मुझे लगता है मेरी सबसे पसंदीदा वो एक गांव की एक लड़की है जिसकी जिंदगी का कोई डिसीजन वो खुद नहीं ले सकती। एक लड़का है जो शहर में काम करता है, वो बहुत मुश्किलों से कुछ पैसा जुटा लेता है। वो उस लड़की से प्यार करता है और चाहता है उससे शादी करना, लेकिन वो उसके बाप उसको कहीं पैसे वाले इंसान से शादी कराना चाहता है। तो बहुत ही अजीब ही एहसास है इसमें कुछ।
ये चाय चाय
मुझे पूछे कोई तो हमें उठाएगा नहीं, मैंने कहा मैं हूँ ना। क्या भरोसा, क्या भरोसा, वी गेट वेरी फ्रेंड्स लाइक अशोक, क्या जरूरत है आपको और the other kind।
Namaskar. A very good evening to all of you who are here for this, I don't know what is the number? 64th session of Art Matters, which we have been organizing for the past almost 7 years, every month except May and June. So there is no relief for you during the 10 months that we are here. This is done in collaboration with the India International Center, who provide us the venue. The rest is our doing. Now today we have an interesting session celebrating literature. Now there are of course many ways of celebrating literature, there are many ways of anything. One celebration of literature, after all literature celebrates life, so why not life celebrate literature once in a while? So that is one way of doing it. The other is that literature should be brought to many more people than it is able to reach. So we have two persons who belong to two different approaches of celebrating, in a manner of speaking. URVASHI BUTALIA, who is a well-known figure, both as a writer and as a publisher. She has brought many such voices which we had not heard but for her publications. So she is the one who has brought the voices which were either marginalized or not heard or had not even spoken perhaps. So that is one way of celebrating literature. The other is NAMITA GOKHALE, who's a novelist and could not rest with that fact. So many years ago, she decided to organize the very well-known Jaipur Literature Festival. And I have been associated with it almost from the beginning, one or two before that. It was a small thing, cozy, lazy, but it was nice. And then now it has grown into such a big thing, it appears to be almost unmanageable.
Almost.
At least intolerable in many old men like me. And yet, it is so well managed that barring a chanced interruption, and you know we have now many interrupters, and there are hordes of them, and there are, barring them, it's a very, and their literature's definition has expanded. It is not just literature as literature, fiction and poetry and essays and criticism. fiction, I mean literature, in Jaipur Literature Festival includes journalism, philosophy, politics, religion, etc. It also includes Bollywood actors and sometimes some articulate politicians. But Jaipur Literature Festival also created a series of festivals all over. The number of festivals that now take place and the thrill of having an audience, such a large audience. The other thing there is that everything starts on time. And there are incredible urgencies. One of them I remember. I was supposed to, something on Urdu, which we had talked, Javed Akhtar and I were to be in conversation. And Javed Akhtar inexplicably developed a pain in the back, not in the neck. So about 1:30, when we were helping ourselves to some goodly wine and lunch, NAMITA GOKHALE walks up to me and he said, well, there is a crisis, Javed Akhtar is not coming, so now you and Prasoon Joshi.
Now you are Javed Akhtar. I said, you become Javed Akhtar.
Now, so we went to by the time, 2:30 means 2:30. By the time there was a huge audience. And of course, a large number of that audience must have come from Javed Akhtar. So I told them, कि भाई देखिए जो होना था वो तो हो नहीं रहा है और जो होने जा रहा है उसका भी पता नहीं, तो अभी आपके पास समय है, अगर आप चाहें तो कहीं और जा सकते हैं. And I must tell you that they remained and we carried out the session in whatever way. So there are these kinds of, somehow rain gods take Jaipur Literature Festival into account once in a while. So there was a rain and everything was wiped out, so it has to be held in those rooms and things of that kind. So it's a very interesting phenomena that a literature festival which is started in Jaipur, and Jaipur has no particularly literary tradition to be proud of or to boast of. I mean, it has some kind, but that is all right. Indian languages have made some inroads into the festival. Otherwise, it's of course dominated by English. But that's another matter. So we have two persons talking about celebrating literature. And a last minute entry into the is Manasi Subramaniam, who is a senior commissioning editor at Penguin Random House. So she will be talking to these two ladies, the venerable ones, and also try to hopefully either provoke them into many flights of imagination, of acts, or control them when they are going ori. But then I leave it to Manasi Subramaniam. The rule of the game is that they will be talking for about 45 minutes or so, and after that about 15 minutes of questions and answers. And the questions have to be remarkably brief, if possible witty, if possible none. Thank you very much for being here. And now to Manasi Subramaniam.
Is this on? I don't think this is on.
It's on. Hello? Yeah? No. Which is the on?
Okay. Thank you, Ashok ji. It is my privilege to be here talking to women whom I consider colleagues, friends, mentors, amongst many other things. As Ashokji said, we are here to celebrate literature, and there are many, many ways of doing that. So why don't we start with the basics? What does a celebration of literature mean to the both of you? And I'm asking this in a very personal way. I'm asking this in a, what does it mean to you as a publisher, as a writer, as a feminist? And what does it mean to you as a LitFest director, again, a writer, and so much more? What does it mean in those very sort of personal capacities? What has it meant in your life?
So start from here.
Yeah, why don't we start with Namita while I move this mic to you?
Okay, so I actually made all kinds of notes because I thought today is one of those days where I'll dry up and not know what to say. But now I've written down so many notes, I don't know where to begin. So first of all, I want to thank you, Ashokji, for the kind and unkind words about Jaipur Literature Festival, which is the attitude of most people in this room, that they both love the festival and yet there are lots of things about it which, with a sense of stakeholders, बड़े अपनेपन से, they know कि उसमें क्या खूबियाँ हैं और क्या उसमें बर्बादियाँ हैं. And that is part of the greatest triumphs of the Jaipur Literature Festival, that people who come there, even when they criticize it with a sense of belonging. And that is what I include Urvashi, because Urvashi is the advisor and has been from the very beginning at the Jaipur Festival. So that sense which has come up between me, William, Sanjoy and the team and some accident, it has that sense of engagement in the audiences. And that is what I think has led to the success, because the audiences, the huge audiences, are well read and engaged. Because the audiences are engaged, therefore the writers feel that buzz and so they give of their best. So that is the trick. But I've learned a lot from Urvashi, and one of the most important things that I've learned from her wisdom, her sensitivity, is on manuals. I mean, this is the opposite of a manual, but from the very first year, she'd come by, she'd drop by, she'd look at the list, and she'd say, Namita, too many men. So we now try that, except where it's really essential for the session that those two people be in conversation, we try very hard to make sure that there is the inclusive voice of a woman in every session. And I think it adds tremendously to the whole feel of it. Just when I got here, I was looking at the email, and some India Today conclave in Bombay tomorrow or day after, and they're just men and men and men and men and men. That's the sort of thing. Now about celebration, I think I'm a little bit, I won't say I'm not normal, but I have a overreaching sense of enthusiasm. Anything I do, whether it is writing a book, eating an ice cream, getting into a fight with a friend or a colleague, I do it with a little extra passion. More than is strictly needed in a sane world. And I say this celebration I try to bring into everything I do. I love people arguing and fighting. And when they come and fight on an equal ground in the festival or in any other month, I think it adds a lot. So it began really, I won't go on and on with Urvashi.
Please go on and on.
This began in the first Nimrana Literature Festival, I think, which we did in 2002, where all these ground rules of engagement were laid. Because we brought in all the diaspora writers, Savidya Naipal and so on and so forth. And we had the Indian language writers, and this is the first time they all came together. Until then, there was this huge divide between them all, and it resulted in a huge, huge, huge mother of all fights. Because Sheila Reddy put in a cover of Outlook magazine, something provocative, and that fight, I think, was the most liberating thing for everybody, because everybody said what they had to say. And the slightly odd sort of feeling that had been going around that the best writing was in the Indian languages, which Khushwant Singh had said. Khushwant Singh had actually written an article somewhere saying that Indian languages had no vocabulary. And Salman Rushdie had written in an anthology that the best writing was happening in English. So that heads-on collision and argument and fight led to the energy and the sparks, and it led to some collaborations between the Indian languages and English. So that's what I have always celebrated. The fact that we are a literature with 24, 22 or 24 as you see it, and I'm going to look at the numbers now, 22 official national languages, 122 regional languages, 13 recognized scripts, 2,000 mother tongues, so on and so forth. It's a huge literary canvas in this country and this culture. And if we can, the more we can get them to celebrate together, to argue together, to sort of breaking each other's teeth and jaws, get into the conversation, then that literary moment which India is waiting for will happen. That will impact everything, politics, economy. It's important for people to write, think and argue. So that is what moves me. Now coming to the popular, I'm always blamed for talking about Bollywood and getting in Rishi Kapoor and Karan Thapar. Not Karan Thapar. Karan Johar. Sorry. Different. Very different. Yeah. Well, I don't know which is the real intellectual. But so this popular culture, I think India resides in the popular culture. I think our poetry is alive in cinema. And if people like Gulzar Saab and Javed and others can actually have their poems recited and in the lips and hearts of the public, Sahib Ludhianvi, all that tradition has led to a very important part of it. So the Desi and the Margi, interaction of high and popular culture, it's a part of it. So, I mean, bring it on, we'll eat it. That's our attitude in the Jaipur Festival. Now, that is what I mean by celebration. Go out and no holds barred, say what you have to say, everybody say what they have to say. If you have the intelligence to say it well and you have the civility to say it with some decorum, that's it. So for me, a celebration means a free-for-all. Okay.
Can I quickly ask you one question before Urvashi answers? Because you said in the beginning that Urvashi had pointed out that Litfests have too many manuals. So my question is, over the last 12 years now, have you noticed that it's getting easier and easier to be inclusive without an effort?
No, it's just some subjects you get lots of women possibly. It's always difficult to get a really credible economist sometimes who's available there and then to take on a very difficult financial subject. It's not impossible, but often those people are academics. So there are some disciplines where it's easier. But always women are, there's no other, I don't think we had a problem in the beginning and I don't think we have a problem now.
Has it had a ripple effect with other Litfests? Have others sort of taken that kind of mantle on?
It depends on the niyat of that festival and who's curating it.
Yeah, I think it does depend on that because if the curators want to think about getting more inclusive panels, then you'll see that and you'll start to see that reflected and it does get easier because when you start thinking and when you kind of don't take the, within quotes, the difficulty of finding a woman or a person of another identity on a panel which would normally be dominated by men. When you don't take that difficulty as an obstacle or as a given and need to stretch your mind a little bit, it becomes easier. We are everywhere and we are very intelligent. And we have a lot to say. I had a really good female economist in my office all day today. And we were working out a research project on women's workforce participation. And I thought of many other female economists. So next time you're looking for one, just give me a call.
Yes, ma'am. Yes, boss.
No. So I want to come in. May I?
Yeah.
You have another question?
No, that was my question.
So to start with, Namita's enthusiasm for battle and for discussion, and is very evident. And the first time Namita and I met, we had a fight, and the fight was on a feminist issue. And I thought to myself, my God, this woman has no feminist sense at all. I don't know if I'm going to ever talk to her again. She thought, my God, this intolerant feminist. But we became great friends and we now look back with great affection on that battle. So to respond to your question about celebrating literature and what do we celebrate and why do we celebrate, I'll speak as a publisher. So as a publisher who's been publishing now for over 45 years. I think one of the most exciting things for me about celebrating literature is the ever-evolvingness of it. So there is no horizon that you reach, and here's literature and it's now over and everything else you publish is a repeat of X, Y, Z. But it is the continuing newness of the material that you discover, that you publish. And even as I sometimes despair as a publisher in trying to get out the voices of writers who do not feature in the canon or whom the canon does not respect or does not want to allow entry, I also rejoice at the kinds of learnings that as a reader and a publisher that come to me from those voices, and how those, the discovery or the searching or the publishing or the articulation or the amplifying, call it what you like, of those voices actually expands, stretches, enriches, nuances, layers the canon and layers the world of literature. So to me, that is something amazingly to be celebrated. And also the fact that literature actually is able to say things, and especially in a country like India, where you have so much to discover. Namita has pointed out the languages, but literature is able to somehow articulate the things that perhaps other disciplines, bound by their disciplinary boundaries, are not able to give voice to. And I remember when I was writing my MA dissertation on Premchand, and on the social realities in Premchand's work, one of the sentences I use, which has stayed with me forever, that literature adds that dimension to our understanding of the world that history or politics or sociology cannot do. It somehow enriches the arid terrain of those disciplines. So in some ways, I think that is something to celebrate about literature. And I'll give you an example of it. So in this room, we have some poets, young poets who are called Mia poets and who come from Assam. And the somehow deeply despairing and tragic and deeply politicized terrain in which they find themselves, which for those of us who are trying to comprehend what is going on, neither is a political analysis enough, nor is a sociological or ethnological or anthropological understanding enough, nor is a historical record enough. But one Mia poem, in the short space of 10 lines, can move you to the core with the depth of understanding about a very complex issue. And that's to celebrate about literature.
That's lovely. I do want to ask you the same question I asked Namita, which is it getting easier to open up the space and make it more inclusive, or is it getting harder?
Okay, so let me talk about that from the point of view of women, because that's what really my experience is. I think it was, I know it was really hard when we started, say 35 years ago, when we started the first feminist publishing house in this country. It was really hard to get women's voices heard, really hard to get any attention at all for the books that we were publishing. Over time, things have changed. And the difficulty at that time came from many things. It came because the Indian book market was dominated by foreign books, and it was dominated by textbooks, which it continues to be today. But a space has opened up for general books for various reasons. And my own analysis is that it began to open up when the rupee had its first fall against the dollar, and when the importing books became more expensive. So there were fewer units of imported books, and you started to get space in the market for Indian books. So publishers like us were able to enter into that space. But nonetheless, we were alternative, we were small, we were under-resourced, so we didn't get much of a hearing. Our first book that got attention in the Indian media was a book of short stories by Indian women writers that we published in translation from 7 languages. But nobody even noticed it here until it got picked up and noticed in England as part of a promotion of 20 feminist books. And it was one of those 20 feminist books. And India Today, which was at that time a new magazine, their foreign correspondent picked it up and said, oh, this book about Indian women is getting promoted in England. And we thought, this is our book. This is an Indian book published in India first. So, but anyway, that reverse attention helped us to. Now, over the years, because I think of a growing women's movement, because of the growth of the media, because of, even at a policy level, taking the issue of gender into account, and because of the opening up, since the 90s, of the Indian market in many different ways, so media, especially television, then internet, all of these things, I think there is much more attention, much more attention. We are no longer out there on a limb, the only ones publishing books about women. Everybody's doing it. And that's great, because everyone is doing it, which is interesting for us, because it both validates what you do, and it creates new challenges. So everyone is publishing books, women writers are getting noticed more, but still the awards go to men by and large. Still there are men writers are much more, we've heard all this before, right? I don't want to sound like a stuck record repeating it. But I think for us then, the challenge is, when we started, we still publish in English, right? That's a limitation as far as I see, but it's where my expertise is. But when we began, we could congratulate ourselves that we were alternative and doing something that nobody else was doing. Now everybody's doing it. And so that's not the only challenge, but we have to ask ourselves that this category woman, what does it mean? In a country like India, can you be located in Delhi? Can you be publishing women's work only in English and call yourself the alternative? You can't. You can congratulate yourself up to a point. So you have to start opening up to forms of marginalization, marginalized voices. They could be marginalized because of language, because of region, location, religion, class, caste, and so on and so forth. So to answer your questions, a long-winded answer, yes, spaces have opened up, but those spaces are limited, and the entry into those spaces is of those who are already privileged, and who got some space because a feminist publishing house started up and created a market, but who would have got that space perhaps anyway, maybe 20 years later.
Right.
So certain kinds of voices still don't find articulation or still don't find recognition.
Right. So, Namita, we just spoke about spaces and amplification, and you've exercised this massive reverse colonization project by taking JLF everywhere.
Yeah.
So tell us a little bit about what that experience has been and what the response to that has been.
Can I have that? So, there's like the success of the Jaipur Literature Festival took us all by surprise. It was like some monster that grew and grew and grew. And I worked pretty much on my intuition. I think this could, I believe in the Pierre Goel theory of Einstein and Newton or whatever. So, around the third or the fourth year of the Jaipur Literature Festival, these people came to us from Boulder, Colorado. And there's a lady called Jessie, and they had come quite by accident. They were Tibetan scholars, and they came there for some reason or the other, loved the festival. They've been coming every single year for 12 years now. They came up to me and they said, we want to take the festival to Boulder, Colorado. So Sanjoy pulled his long hair and he looked puzzled, because he had no idea where Boulder, Colorado was. And neither did I have any idea where Boulder, Colorado was. But I said, nahi Sanjoy, we have to do it, it'll work. Because I liked the sound of Boulder. It sounded like the sort of place that should have a literature festival. So I said, yes, yes, yes. And Sanjoy went there on a visit, fell in love with the place, and I'm just giving an example. The city of Boulder has supported us. When they ran short of funding, they had a public city hall, town hall meeting where almost 170 citizens came up and gave testimonial on why the Jaipur Literature Festival must stay and why it is essential for Colorado, Boulder to have that feeling. Now Boulder has more PhDs per square mile than any other place in the world. And it's called the Boulder vibe. It's not like the rest of America. It's a lot of old aging hippies and people like me and URVASHI. So it just by accident that I sort of said, yeah, otherwise we could have said, but we pushed it and it happened. First time we went out of India was for the South Bank thing, which was part of a South Asian alchemy festival, where we did well, but that was a more conventional way of reaching out to the Indian diaspora. And there again, it becomes a question of not feeding the audience what you think they want to be fed. Indian diasporas don't want to know only about whatever it is, saris, bindis and things like that. Indian diasporas are extremely intelligent, upwardly mobile, clever people. And they want to feel a part of the whole, they want to be included in. So now when we have our thing in the British Library, it's our third year here and our sixth year in London, we have people like Sir Venki Ramakrishnan, we have people like Angela Saini. So even the Asians and the Indians who are there are people who are making a huge mark there in the fields that they are doing. And we don't sort of, we include anybody. We have Chinese, African writers, Australian writers, and I want to say this, Jan is sitting in the front row, I want to say, it sounds a bit like my co-director William Dalrymple, but you will excuse me for saying something which I think is funny, but the sun no longer sets on the Jaipur Literature Festival, because we have festivals in Adelaide, we have festivals in Jaipur, we have festivals in Ireland, Belfast, we have in London, we have in Boulder, Toronto, in New York and in Houston. So we can keep going around the world.
And them in Johannesburg and Cairo also.
Yeah, but those were not GLFs. So these things, they create a band of people who are like-minded, who like the democratic platform that the GLF festivals provide, where we don't have these strict hierarchies of the big stars and the small stars. For us, the young, the unknown, the bottom of the ladder are as important as the bigger stars. Of course, some get bigger audiences and some get lesser. And so I think, for example, Manoranjan Vyopari, who was our great success story 2 years ago, who was a very competent Dalit writer who we invited 2 years ago when his biography was being translated to English. And he'd been to jail, and there's a fascinating story how Mahashweta Devi had inducted him to write, and he had learned to write. And now, because of the platforming in the Jaipur Literature Festival, which has got him the tick attention, his book has been bought by Amazon and it's been translated into 12 languages, and I have absolutely no doubt we will then take him to Africa or we will go somewhere, and these voices will get more and more resonance. So it's a question of creating a resonance by creating an actual real buzz, not an artificial hype around the world, and learning from different people what is local, what is universal, what is cosmopolitan. So in Boulder, we are heavy on Native American voices and on Latino voices and on Mexican voices, which don't get enough of a platform in the normal all-white festivals there. And that's why we carry weight. It's not so in Australia, because it's not just that's our mission. Aboriginal voices are given a lot of weightage in America or in Canada, but you learn that each place has its own approach. And the learnings from these festivals and the sort of new voices outside the commercial trope of the best-selling, pushing by the publishers, that is what is causing this.
Do you think, thanks to LitFest, efforts like the LitFests, Jaipur going abroad and that sort of thing, do you think publishers internationally are now paying more attention to voices from the margins, to a much more diverse literature, and perhaps even more literature from India?
Sadly, I'm not so sure of that just yet, because I think the Indian moment in literature has sort of passed. There was some time ago where anything that came out of literature found a market. But I think at the moment, around the world, the literatures that are being bought by small independent or the larger publishers are of the local diaspora, of Indian origin people. And because that's the need of the day, for them to tell their stories of assimilation or alienation or whatever, and for people there to read and understand them.
Yeah.
So I think it's not exactly like that, but I think the small publishers, the independent publishers, have a huge role to play. But nobody's sure what is the India story at the moment.
Yeah, yeah.
Could I add to
Yeah, I
what
was going to
Namita
ask
said?
you to, in fact.
Now just to add to what Namita is saying, I think one of the remarkable things about GLF, which is now also prevalent in many other festivals, is the attention it pays to Indian languages and literatures from other parts of India. So of course English is dominant because it's an international festival, but the fact is that other languages are not absent, which is very encouraging for publishers in the Indian languages to be there with their writers, and then there is an openness to including those writers. And so while it may not be the case that international publishers will pick up on Indian writers after coming to GLF, because by the nature of the profession, publishers hang out with their own friends and they drink with their own friends, so they don't even go to sessions, which, you know, they're not adventurous about going to sessions. But what does happen is that a number of Indian publishers pick up authors and exchanges happen and translations happen between Indian languages as a result of the exposure at festivals, and I think particularly at JLF.
Yeah.
I mean, I've seen this happen with several of our books which have moved into other Indian languages. I've seen it happen with other Indian language publishers, and therefore they are more encouraged to attend it.
So
I think that's really
if I
important.
could add this.
Do you want this?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
just keep this. I think
So it's like this, that the Jaipur festival now has, many of you may know this, we have also got within it a publishing component called the Jaipur Bookmark. And the Jaipur Bookmark gets publishers from around the world, and Neeta is sitting there who puts it all together. And we get Indian publishers, including, say, Ruby Hembrom, who is the Santali publisher. And there in the people, by necessity, over a drink, over whatever snacks they are getting, they get to talk. So even the international publishers who are maybe a bit snobbish are now eager to watch what is happening. And I think the true effect of that will come after 3 or 4 years. You know, when 1 or 2 books have come out of those exchanges and made a splash, then the herd mentality will follow that. Let's go there and look at the Indian writers.
But Urvashi, as a publisher, does it matter to you getting that international publication or international acclaim or even a review in The Guardian, for example? Does it matter?
Yes, of course it matters to me to get an international publication because I like to earn money for my publishing house and my authors. I think it matters a great deal to authors. It makes a huge difference to them to know that their work has moved out of their environment elsewhere. If you're asking, I mean, politically, my market and my audience is here. I publish for India. So if you asked me as a human being and a feminist, I don't give a damn actually if it's published outside or not, as long as it's published here and it gets a response here. But as a publisher, yeah, of course it matters. And it matters to my authors too, and that's really important. So I have to work on their behalf.
Right.
I can't be standing out there holding my political flag only.
So if I could add to that, I think one of the things that contributed to the success of the Jaipur Festival in those initial years was that, on the other hand, as the curator of a large amount of the festival programming, unlike Willie, I didn't give a damn about the New York Times. And if they thought that this writer from Bihar is the writer or this writer. So I made sure that I'm looking in my own mirror.
Yeah.
I'm not looking through the reflected lens of the approval of the Western establishment or the Western. And I was very cussed about this. And I think that intrigued a lot of people there. Because they said, oh, so it just got a different texture.
Yeah.
Because of that, which is not to say that one doesn't deeply respect the filtering process of the literary establishment outside India, but we try to create our own, not even our own filter, we try to create our own platforms and anybody can filter them as they want.
So how does that landscape alter in a place like Australia, which is, I mean, in some senses, from a purely publishing standpoint, it is a similar market to India because people consider it to be part of the Commonwealth, and so people, you know, a lot of UK publishers publish into India and Australia in a very similar way. But Australia, like India, has its own thriving publishing culture. So when you take JLF to Australia, how are those dynamics playing off each other?
Well, it's the same sort of dynamics as you encounter in India. There is a great deal of hurt and bitterness. It has many racial divides as a society, and Aboriginal writers and the immigrant societies there, they do feel left out of some of the literary processes, though they get much more token support in financial terms, or in we must have an Aboriginal writer in this panel kind of thing. But when you pay attention to the program and when you bring those voices alive, then it has quite a different impact. And everybody is eager to hear a good story. So I think that is why the Jaipur model works so well there. Because we are very happy to look from the bottom up. And it's the same in other places as well. But Australia, yes. And there's always been this exchange between, say, the artists of Madhya Pradesh and the Aboriginal artists there, because the art styles are so similar. Or there are a lot of Indian scholars there, like Mridula Chakravarti and people who are doing work on the Dalit writing and Aboriginal writing. But again, it's a question of getting into that hierarchy of popular writing, and so. Well, here it is, let it all hang out, then it will find its own level.
So I want to ask both of you a question that, you know, even I grapple with all the time, which is how much do you believe that all art has the sort of nature of politics? How much responsibility do artists and gatekeepers and curators have to treat art as political? How much of the personal is political?
Who will you ask first?
I'll ask Urvashi first because I think she has an answer. I can see it on her face.
I'm not sure I have an answer, but no. Before I answer that, I want to go back to the question you had asked, Namita, and actually it links with what you're asking, because when you asked about the parallels between Australia and India as markets which are dominated to some extent by old histories of colonial rule, you are asking a question about the politics of the flow of knowledge and the politics of the ownership and generation of knowledge across the world. And because of the old histories, this has always been an unequal thing. Generally, knowledge flows in one direction. Generally, knowledge is seen to be originated in one place, and the knowledge originated in that place, whatever that place might be, is seen to be of a higher value than the knowledge that we generate on the ground over here. So I think that, you know, in being in a country like India, you're very interestingly placed to both battle with that history and that historical assumption and own the parts of it that empower you. So, for example, in Africa, in African countries, in the Middle East, we as Indian publishers have been able to give British and American publishers who dominated that market in terms of textbooks a run for their money. We have the language, we have the expertise, we produce books more cheaply, we can reach those books out there, so we've been able to chase them out. It's a great feeling. I mean, I don't do it myself because I don't publish textbooks, but for those publishers who do, it's a great feeling. So sometimes there is that part. Sometimes there is a different thing that you're at the receiving end of it. So I think in a sense, being a publisher based in our countries and being an independent small publisher, you live this politics. You can't wipe it out. So that, to connect to your next question on how much of the personal is political and art and politics, writing and politics, as a feminist, which is how I function, one of the biggest contributions of feminism to the world has been the establishing of the collapsing of the divisions between the political and the personal. There is no such division. There is no such division as the home and the world. There is no such division as domestic work and outside work. It is a fact of life that what happens inside that supposed private space is deeply connected to the political economy or what happens in the public space. So the personal is political. To me, all art is political. if an artist, writer, somebody disclaims the politics of their writing, I personally feel that they are defrauding themselves, but I'm willing to give them the space for it because they have a right to their view, and if they want to think that their writing is not political, then that's fine, that's up to them. But I, as a reader, will receive that writing differently from the writer who writes it, right? And in a sense, a writer is a being who is placed in society, and that being is not a neutral being. You know, you're influenced by your gender, by your location, I mean all sorts of things. These are truisms, I don't really need to say them. But having said that, I'll say this is an old battle on which the lines are not that clear. They are very blurred. So I don't want to take a stance which wipes out the blurriness, because I think the blurriness is what allows us to talk about these issues in very nuanced ways. So I may believe that, I mean, all my writing is deeply political, okay? But that doesn't mean that if you're writing, you would feel that strongly and say it's political. You may think it's not, and you have a right to think that. Who am I to say that? But if I feel your writing is political, okay, then that's how I'll receive it. So it's, I think the jury is still out on this one. We don't really have any answers. But anyway, that's how I feel. I think that we are located in a political framework, so we have to deal with that.
So, before you answer, I want to alter the question slightly.
I think so.
Because she...
Otherwise, I'd be rebutting her by you.
But you can.
But I don't want to put my effort into rebutting you. I want to put my effort into saying what I think.
Okay.
You know.
So, Urvashi said something interesting, which is that as a writer, you write with a certain intent. That does not have to be the reader's intent when they receive what you have written. But you, as a director of a lit fest, have somehow blurred the line between reader and writer. And a lot of people who come to a place...
I'm a writer too.
And you're a writer, exactly. And you are engaging with your readers in a very different way.
Let me give a answer and then you make up the question later. I don't want to sound provocative, but you have to, no? But I mean, I'm sure Ashita will understand what I'm saying, or Ashokji, or somebody will understand that I believe, at least personally, in being an irresponsible person at some level. Because if as an artist you're trying to be responsible, you're tying yourself into a perspective which is not open to all the madness and craziness and openness of what is available to hear and understand in the world. And most ideologies, I'm not talking of the political or personal, I'm saying most ideologies, most of us who believe in an ideology forget that our so-called ideologies are absolutely deeply linked to our upbringing, our opportunities, our gender, our sex, our economic situation. So in the end, a lot of what we think is our ideology is actually a prejudice. Because we are looking from a particular perspective. We are not looking at the whole picture. And we are not looking deep into other people's minds. So what I try to do in curating the festival is to be responsible, to listen to anything I can, and be extremely whimsical, and sometimes downright silly. And some of the most successful sessions are those where I have been silly. I have listened into something totally absurd, and out of that absurd, silly, whimsical story has come a very deep resonance with people. Because, I mean, I'm not trying to make this into a theory of anything. I just, for me, not as a writer, because I write fiction, I have the right to be irresponsible. Because the fiction is told through fictional voices, and you, as a writer, try to juxtapose them to tell a story and a narrative that has credibility. So I am not trying to put any point of view across in my novels. In fact, they always have so many contradictory points of view that people have to really negotiate them and come up with what they want to take or leave from it. But in the festival, and I've got a lot of criticism for it, but I try to look at all points of view. I got, 2 years ago, I tried to do a festival on, it was the 100 years of the October Revolution, and I said, okay, so let's do the left and the right. And of course I got a huge amount of flack because on the right I called 2 people from the RSS. On the left I invited Sitaram Yechuri and M.A. Devi. And for some reason, various reasons, both of them dropped out, and it was made to look like well, as though, I don't know what. But I didn't feel an inch of discomfort at doing this because I felt any platform, because I don't have that political, keyhole to look through. I said, we have to listen to everybody, or in a different way. And this one got me a lot of flack, including from you and from everybody, not this RSS thing. But we did a session on mansplaining. And it was a lovely session, but I thought, if we are doing a session on mansplaining, we should have the original mansplainer of them all. So I got Suhail Seth on that session. And people got very, very, very angry. They couldn't see the humor of it. And poor Suhail Seth also got, I don't think he was battered like that later, and probably it was good for him, he got prepared for it. So I'm just open to anything and everything. And as long as it's told credibly and with intelligence. Does that answer my slightly different views on the political and the personal?
Yeah, it does, except I'm desperately trying to get the 2 of you to fight with each other, and you insist on being civil and respectful to each other all the time.
But the fact of the matter is that I'm not open to anything and everything. Mm-hmm. But we're still friends. That's okay. But I would not, for example, I'm a feminist publisher. I publish books about women, but I would not publish Pragya Thakur or Sushma Swaraj or XYZ. Doesn't enter my space. It would, NAMITA would.
No, I would not publish.
Not publish. You're not publishing.
So there's a very big difference between publishing and creating a platform where they would be in, I think that is, now I think you're trying to fight with me, because I had certainly not invited Pragya Thakur, and I would not invite her, and Pragya Tiwari I would invite. But I do try to create the contradictions in the conversation, so that something larger than the individual parts come out. And that's how I try to curate.
So no success in making us fight. Try another time.
So we talked a little bit about how much has changed over the years in our attempts at inclusivity, for one thing. At this point, if I were to ask both of you, what change would you like to see in your respective worlds as far as literature is concerned? The one change that you think is sorely lacking still after everyone's attempts? Just one.
I can never answer the one wala question.
Okay,
so you want to go first?
I just take life as it comes. I'm not waiting for change. It happens anyway, for better or for worse. So I'm not looking for any change. The only thing I wish was that all these wonderful literature festivals that are happening around India, I wish some of them would be more, would have a little more integrity, because many of them are just people trying to meet celebrities. And if the one change, I wouldn't call it the one change, I think the one thing that the literary establishment, or the opposite of the literary establishment, needs in India is dedicated institution building.
Right.
And I think that is what I would give 100 on 100 to Ashok Vajpayee ji sitting here. From Bharat Bhavan to, we won't go into the Sangeet Natak Academy, but because, into governmental, purely governmental these things, but what he has created in Bharat Bhavan, it may have had its ups and downs over the years, but it remains a platform and a center for excellence, so he knew how to create that legacy of institutions. And that's what I'm trying to do, for instance, in Jaipur, is that when I move on from that particular slot, we continue doing it well. Or what he has done with the Raza Foundation. Or in its way, what the Sahitya Academy, in a slightly drudgery way, but they stay at it and they do it, The thing is to keep things moving and going. So I don't want change. I want archiving, I want legacy, I want people to remember what was written 20 years ago and be there somewhere. So I'm not looking for any change.
But at the institutional level?
I'm looking for a depth of resources so that we can remember what happened day before yesterday. No, so I'm not looking at tomorrow in that sense, which will come anyway.
Okay, so let me try to answer your one wala question. But before I do that, I want to add to your list of Ashokji's achievements something which is not that well known, is that when he was in Wardha, he, along with Apurvanand, who is somewhere in the audience, or maybe he's gone, 2 men and some women together set up the first women's studies course in Hindi, and worked with a bunch of feminists to create a textbook of readings for that women's studies theme. It's another matter that his politics sometimes goes against him, but you did do that, I remember that very well. So what would I like to see the one change? I think really, you can be as unrealistic as you like when you're dreaming of that one change. So what I'd really like to see is a really multiple, vibrant, multilingual, multi-genre literary culture in this country, which kind of looks at all the sorts of things we are writing, thinking about, all sorts of new forms of writing, and they all inhabit this world and we all get a chance to read them. It'll never happen, or maybe it'll happen.
Maybe it'll happen.
Already, it's beginning to happen.
I think open it to the...
On that note, we have hit our 45-minute mark, so we will, shall I bring that mic to you?
Just a minute. The mic shall come to you. Sit. The mic will come.
Okay. So, while the mic is coming, may I ask that you keep your questions short, and if you have a little bit more to say to our panelists, you can always find them after the panel is done.
So, NAMITA, I was right in saying that one of the motivating factors of starting the literary festival, was to create a space for women writers. I think somewhere you said that would make women writers more visible. And so in that perspective, what do you feel that this expansion and the whole geographical and subject-wise of literary festivals, has it now diluted the feminist or women's issues much more than you may have expected at that time?
I'm sorry, I never said that. I don't know why. I mean, I just started these festivals. It just happened, and I wanted more and more voices to be heard. And one of those things was that more women's voices being heard. But that was never my primary thing. As a feminist publisher, that is more URVASHI's thing. So maybe you can answer.
No, but have you think that more voices are being heard?
Of course they are. There's just no doubt about it. I think they are being heard.
As a result of this, I mean, of course, URVASHI.
Because of all the celebrations.
The purpose was to create a space of women. But as you said, the purpose was...
Yes, I think so. Because I think more women are writing fiction than men for some reason.
The writing, yes, but the visibility of women...
The visibility is very strong, I think. I may be wrong, but I think it's very strong.
There's a question here.
Yeah. No, I'll ask a short question, basically. I'll ask a short question here.
Okay.
My voice can be heard?
No, but
the mic is also
got the mic now.
Yes. Mia,
Go ahead.
Oh, well, it was a nice hearing both of you. I've known both of you for quite some years, and I've also been one of the invitees at the Jaipur Literature Festival. Well, I know that you both, in their own respective ways, have given spaces to those who were never heard of before, or lesser known, I should say, writers, and also drawn from the lesser known languages. But have you ever tried to give space to the literature which is never written down? I'm trying to draw your attention to oral literature of this country, because the enormous plethora of oral literature tucked in various oral languages.
We always, the oral literatures, the Vachik Parampara of especially Rajasthan and all over India is very, very important to the festival. There are always sessions around that. We have had people like the Pandun Kakara, Ghafiruddin Mewati, the Dingle performers, I mean, the one and all.
And have you
Always.
documented those now? So for the
Well, yes, they are all up if you go on our website. I mean, I don't know how you will access them because they won't be categorized under oral literature. No, but how would you find it in the sense that the keyword?
Yeah, these are the unwritten languages, let's put it.
No, but they are all very much documented. But of course, there's always more and more to do. We hope you come back and talk about it more in another. We've been wanting to get you back to talk about the Andromenes literature, and the last time you talked about, also the languages that are disappearing, the new languages that are coming up, and we are very, very, very keen on oral literature, but still it's not enough, whatever we do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
This question is more specifically to URVASHI, and you know that Dinesh and I now handle a small literary imprint, exclusively devoted to translations from Indian languages into English. And many of our authors are women authors, and some of them very strong feminist authors. And one of the dilemmas that we do face is, as you know, we publish for a readership. We like to get the books out of the market. Basic problems of getting these books noticed and in the market. So much so that when Dr. Jain and the two of us discussed this, we are a small imprint, but we have actually delved into our resources, and we are actually paying for the first print run of 1,000 copies money up front. Just to get more authors. I'm not looking at that. And in spite of very good reviews and so on. So we have a major all India distributor, but just takes no interest. And do we sell all our books through Amazon? What do we do? I mean, this is the kind of thing that we are facing. I mean, in spite of, that publishing background and various avatars, but this is a problem. So if we don't get the literature out there, there is a signal disservice because people need to read and to be aware. And in fact, that's one of the things, excellent to give voices to marginalized voices, but we also need, if you have mere poetry, then we need to also create, that has to be the harbinger of social change. We have to internalize that. And that's important because the poem cannot move you alone, it has to impact society.
That was Yeah, I mean, I don't think that's a question really as much as a comment. I think it's very hard to get books out to readers, and it's harder to get out unknown voices that we all know, partly because of the way the market is constructed and what it's receptive to, and which books get exposure, and also which get reviewed in the papers, and that's also largely dependent on which journalist gets how much to drink from which publisher. All of that governs this thing. So, but I think that, I mean, not only, yes,
That was
answering.
unfair.
Not quite, but it's not entirely true, but it's not entirely untrue.
Okay, we'll argue later.
We can argue about that later.
Almost got to an
Over a drink, we can talk about that later.
Who will buy it?
I will buy you a drink if you will fight.
So, but I mean, I think that there are, certainly, maybe it's not that we earn a lot of money from the books we publish, but we have to publish those books. We have to get those voices out. And you try different ways, which are not often monetizable, to get out those books. Now, you are backed by a wonderful textbook business, which earns your money for you. So for you, you should be
more adventurous.
Yes, you should be a lot more adventurous and get out those books. And even if it means that you're putting up chapters and people are taking them for free or whatever it is, but that's how you'll have to start, right? And I know that you've been doing it for a while and that you're doing wonderful books, but it's not that easy. If you want to discuss trade secrets, we can do that separately.
Overwritten.
Yeah.
And keep a journalist there also.
Thank you.
There's a question
Yeah.
there.
I only have, I have a question for each of you, but they're just statements I'd like you to respond to. This is for Ms. Butalia. The speaking body is a political body. All art is a self-portrait, hence all art is political. And for you, Ms. Gokhale, statement is, ideologies are not trans-historical but change from culture to culture. But history is culture.
So you want us to respond to those statements?
your statements, according to her.
Sorry?
I don't
No.
Certainly not.
Yeah, no. But I mean, this,
You respond to the first one, and then she can read out the second one again. That's good for us.
Yeah. I mean, the first one, what you said, all art is political, that is really what I believe as well.
But by virtue of it being an expression of the speaking self, which is a political self. As you said,
By virtue of it being an expression of the speaking self, which is a political self.
So what happens to Munna Bhai?
Yeah, so you have to, I mean, I think you have to see that the speaking self is not always an articulate self. The speaking self does not always have a voice, and that voice is not always heard. So in itself, I think that it is an incomplete statement, because it's like Gayatri Spivak's statement saying, can the subaltern speak? I mean, the subaltern can be speaking till she's blue in the face, but if there's no one to listen, it makes no difference at all. So unless art is received, understood, internalized, I think the exercise is incomplete. I don't know if that answers.
And you'll have to say it again. Very quickly.
My name is Abdul Kalam.
No, she's 1 minute. I'll come back to you.
Sorry.
And that's the last question. Yeah.
No, Abdul ka question.
No, Abdul is the last.
Yeah.
That statement for Namita, can you read it again?
Because
earlier you were speaking about the artist being tied up to ideologies or taking upon a certain kind of responsibility.
No, I wasn't saying that. I was saying that I am careful about ideologies, because they often, what we may take as an ideology, has its sources in so many aspects of propaganda, of our own delusions, our own prejudices, our own hopes and aspirations, that I'd always like to look at them through many different lenses. That's all. And every culture has a different way of looking at things. And every historical moment has a different way of looking at things. So therefore, I specialize in having no major views on anything. That's what I was trying to say.
My question is to Gokhale. When you say that right to be irresponsible, I love that sentence. And I dream that if I had that privilege to be responsible, because I wonder when I and my fellow poets, associates, they wrote responsibly and they wrote true stories, but we were labeled as irresponsible. So my question is, that from where you get it right, or even to think that you have a right to be irresponsible.
So do you want me to get really very intellectual now? Should I say that it is your response, it is the responsibility of the artist to be irresponsible. But if it becomes a responsibility, then he is not being irresponsible. So all I'm saying is we got to free float a little. We can't take ourselves so seriously if we want to really be artists. We got to laugh, we got to dream, we got to get it wrong. That's what I mean.
Sure. Thank you.
But Abdul, you have a responsibility.
To be irresponsible.
everyone except
Oh, nice.
Wow.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Very kind of you. Thank you so much.
Come on, what is your responsibility?
Ashok ji. हाँ, please come very detail.
कांटा भी होना चाहिए.
तो होना चाहिए.
कांटे को छोड़ भी सकते हैं.
नहीं कांटा कैसे छोड़ेंगे?
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, friends.
Hold on.
Usually, we don't thank any particular section of the audience. We thank all the audience. Today we are very happy to have some poet friends who are known as Mia poets from Assam. They are here. we had time, we should have arranged a poetry reading, but unfortunately we got the notice very late. But we are grateful that they are here, and they are placed in a very difficult circumstance, but they are very good poets. That I know because I have read some of the translations. Now, on the 17th of September, the Raza Foundation organizes V.S. Gaitonde Memorial Lecture in India Habitat Center. Geeta Kapoor would be talking, giving that lecture entitled Our Moderns. So you are most welcome. On the 19th, here, we have Gandhi Matters, in which Ghulam Muhammad Sheikh, Atul Dodia, and Riaz Komu will be talking about their take on Gandhi. All the three of them have used images of Gandhi in some way or the other. So you are most welcome. And now, of course, with our gratitude, you can go wherever you want.
Thank you.